In today's episode, a complete history of Zelda's development. Starting with the very first game, the Hyrule Fantasy, all the way to Breath of the Wild, and even the development of its sequel. We'll try to reconstruct for you how Zelda's development evolved across 30+ years. How Shigeru Miyamoto first came up with the idea for The Legend of Zelda, who Ganon was based on, and how later figures like Yoshiaki Koizumi and Eiji Aonuma ended up joining the project. What exactly brought them in? The Legend of Zelda. What moved Takashi Tezuka in the first place to back the flagship team at the time, and let them take charge of the series? Inaudible. Before Breath of the Wild existed, that promo demo of Link fighting a giant spider, what was it trying to show, and how did they make it? What genre is Zelda, really? What does it actually focus on? So let's start from the original game, and begin today's story. From this episode onward, we'll start with how the very first Zelda was born, and go all the way to the sequel's development story. So if you're like me, and you're fascinated by every behind-the-scenes story in Zelda's history, Inaudible, then hop on this time travel train with me, and join this journey of discovery. To trace the origins of each entry, our story begins in the second half of 1984. That year, as everyone knows, a lot was happening at Nintendo. And even though the entire game industry was in chaos after the Atari crash, Hiroshi Yamauchi didn't panic. Cartridges were expensive and ate up too much cost. And at the same time, game cartridge rentals were hit by new copyright regulations in Japan. So Yamauchi proposed a plan to Masayuki Uemura. Use floppy disks to store games. But having the medium isn't enough, you need games. Uemura's development group No. 2 was already busy building the disk drive and the disks, and they had very limited manpower left. With so few people, and with help from Uemura's friend Iwata, they managed to get titles like golf and soccer done. But Uemura felt that lineup still looked too thin. So he turned to a team that was in full swing, Nintendo's new game development group No. 4. The team making Super Mario Bros. Of course, that game was already confirmed to ship on a boxed cartridge. Switching it to floppy disks that late would have been absurd. But Uemura still went to see Miyamoto. Even though Miyamoto's team including himself was only 6 people, Uemura hoped they could double up, make Super Mario Bros., and also make another game as a launch title to showcase the disk system. He even told Miyamoto that Super Mario Bros. Would be the last boxed cartridge game in console history, and the new game they were about to make would be the first floppy disk game to open the future. For Nintendo and for the whole industry, this was a truly era-defining job. And he handed it to Miyamoto. Miyamoto went back to his team and called in his 2 most important partners, Nintendo's Golden Trio, or as Iwata later put it, the other 2 members of a Kansai Manzai-style trio, Takashi Tezuka and Toshihiko Nakago. He told them, "We have to develop 2 games at the same time now." One was already in progress, the side-scrolling platformer Super Mario Bros., but for the other one, he had no clear idea yet, so he wanted to talk it through together. The moment those 3 got together, they didn't just open Zelda's future, they also shaped Nintendo's future, and even the future of the entire industry. At first, Miyamoto thought, since they already had 1 game in production, this new game should avoid looking too similar to Super Mario Bros., as different as possible. The more different, the better. Mario is a side-scroller, so they decided not to make another side-view game. Instead, they'd make a top-down game. Mario is linear, so this new one would be less linear. And in Mario's normal state, in a typical run, you can't attack enemies, you can't freely attack, so they'd make a game where you can attack enemies at any time. Different from what they were already making. The more different, the better. As they brainstormed in conversation, Miyamoto suddenly blurted out, "Isn't Indiana Jones really popular lately?" Tezuka and Nakago were totally confused. "We're talking about games, what are you on about?" So Miyamoto explained, "If Raiders is trending, then it means there's a market for exploration and puzzle solving. So maybe we should try making a game with that theme." At first, Tezuka didn't agree with putting exploration and puzzle solving into a game. His reasoning was simple. Exploration and puzzles felt too free. Games of that era, whether the side-scroller they were about to ship, or overseas, or the RPGs that had already had their moment on PC, all shared one trait. As the player, your direction of play is tightly controlled. It's creator-led. In a side-scroller, you can only go right. In an RPG, you mostly move along the story. But exploration and puzzles. That was the first truly hard problem. After hearing that, Miyamoto nodded. Yeah, it's difficult. They'd have to solve a lot of things for the first time. But one line from Tezuka sparked something. RPGs. Western RPGs were mainstream then. But in 1984, no one in Japan had yet made a great sword and sorcery style game. If they were going to challenge something anyway, why not challenge that? And so the three of them kept talking one line after another. Not even caring whether what they said was on topic, just tossing ideas back and forth. And as they talked, they roughly pinned down what kind of game they wanted to make. Miyamoto wanted this new game to feel like this. Like when you were a kid, wandering the hills behind your village without a map. There might be all kinds of things here. Caves where you have no idea what's inside, or paths that you don't know where they lead. Just wandering along roads you may or may not recognize. And then at some point, you'll stumble upon scenery you've never seen before. That's Miyamoto's romance, his philosophy of games. An early sandbox way of thinking. That set the basic design direction for the game. Next came naming the game. Miyamoto was obsessed with naming things just like I am. I spend more time coming up with a title each episode than writing the script and recording the narration. Miyamoto was the same. So for a long time, this game was simply called the Sword and Sorcery Project. Even the character names were chosen casually. The hero's default name Link came from the idea of linking the player and the game. Simple and direct. And the heroine's name, Zelda, came from an American writer Miyamoto admired. The wife of F. Scott Fitzgerald, Zelda Fitzgerald. Simply because Miyamoto believed if there were a real person who could embody the meaning of beauty, it would have to be Zelda Fitzgerald. Many years later, when Miyamoto talked about the inspiration behind the name, he said, she really was a beauty. Interestingly, F. Scott Fitzgerald once had marital troubles, and Zelda mocked him for it. So he started worrying it was his size, and even went to Hemingway to ask him to check for him. And Hemingway promptly wrote the whole thing into a novel. The in-game currency name was also decided pretty casually. They thought rubies looked expensive, so Miyamoto decided on rupees as the game's currency. Only later did he learn that India's official currency is also the rupee. It really was a very offhand way of naming things. After naming everything in the game, it was finally time to decide the title. After discussing it with Tezuka, Miyamoto named it the Hyrule Fantasy, The Legend of Zelda, because it was a story set on the land of Hyrule. So they even planned ahead if the series continued. The first would be the Hyrule Fantasy, The Legend of Zelda. The Legend of Zelda. And the second would be the Hyrule Fantasy, Link's Adventure. And so on. But Miyamoto didn't expect that. When the game was later released in the United States, its name would create a conflict because Final Fantasy was also being released in North America. So Nintendo of America, on their own, decided to drop the main title, the Hyrule Fantasy, and kept only The Legend of Zelda. So now you know why later on, even if one entry barely features Zelda at all, it still has to be called The Legend of Zelda. Miyamoto joked that mistake wasn't entirely unrelated. Link's like, what did I ever do to deserve this? Because at the time, Miyamoto's 6-person team had to finish 2 games within a single year. Everyone was extremely busy. Miyamoto loved adding things on a whim, or flipping the table and changing content midstream. But in front of the original 6 members, he went from demon boss to punching bag. Tezuka later recalled that in their team, it had basically become a running joke. For example, back then, if Miyamoto suddenly proposed adding or changing something somewhere, the person responsible would reply, Mr. Miyamoto, I'm swamped. I don't have time for this. Please stop bothering me. Hearing Tezuka say that, Eiji Aonuma was also present for the interview, apparently showed a look of agreement and admiration. After all, Aonuma himself was the kind of person who, even at the busiest times, still had to help the old man figure out things like how to cut down a shop sign. Still, even though everyone was busy, development didn't become chaotic because there were only 6 people. Their desks were even together. Look up, and you'd see each other. But because they were so busy, all those design documents they wrote were extremely casual, basically scribbled and done. They didn't worry about whether others could understand. And even if someone didn't understand, the person who wrote the request was probably sitting right next to them. If you didn't get it, you just ask. Why make it formal and complicated? Back then, Miyamoto and Tezuka sat side by side. Tezuka sat to Miyamoto's left. One day, the two of them were responsible for planning the world map of Hyrule. So they each took half a sheet of paper and started sketching Hyrule on the fly. But even though it was on the fly, Tezuka drew very carefully. Straight lines, neat shapes, everything orderly. Meanwhile, Miyamoto started going wild. Random symbols everywhere. Lines all crooked and messy. It really was just doodling. Later, Nakago showed that map to Satoru Iwata. And Iwata said, "It feels like 2 completely different worlds were stitched together." But, while Tezuka was extremely serious about map making, he became very casual when writing music requests. For the main theme, his description was basically, "Please write something suitable as a main theme." And there were lots of requests like that. Later, Koji Kondo even pulled out that old request sheet to complain about it. And when Tezuka saw it, he said, "Wow, you can actually make music from something like this. Kondo-san, you're incredible." Miyamoto and Kondo immediately shot back, "Dude, you wrote that." But Tezuka writing requests like that did cause a real problem. Because all he wrote was a piece suitable as the main theme. Kondo had no idea what suitable as the main theme meant. So, with no other choice, he directly used Maurice Ravel's Boro as the theme. That piece is so famous, you'll recognize it the moment you hear it. And if you've watched Digimon, there's no way you haven't heard it. But as release approached, when they entered final debugging, Kondo realized something. The time since Ravel's death to the game's planned release date was exactly 49 years and 11 months, and copyright law said a work could only be freely used 50 years after the creator's death. Delaying the release for that reason would have been ridiculous. So Kondo had no choice but to pull an all-nighter, and in just one night he wrote what became the Zelda theme we all know today. And that casual development style didn't stop there. Tezuka was in charge of dungeon level design. He carefully designed a fairly difficult dungeon, and handed it to Nakago, who would implement it in code. But when Tezuka passed over the plan, he grabbed the wrong version. He gave Nakago the early, simpler draft. By the time Nakago finished implementing it, Tezuka finally realized the content Nakago had built was only about half of what Tezuka had actually designed. So what now? Do they redo everything? Miyamoto looked at it and said, "This dungeon maze is already pretty good. But your more complex version is good too. So how about this? A second quest mode with more complex mechanics than the first run, more enemies, and higher difficulty." Once Miyamoto said it, everyone agreed it was a great idea. So it wasn't just Zelda. Even Super Mario Bros. Had a similar idea with later loops and harder variations. And that's why in Nintendo games, after you clear the first run and the staff credits roll, it's the real game begins. This is where that saying comes from. After a year and a half of effort from those 6 people, the original The Legend of Zelda was finally finished. Miyamoto took the completed game to Yoichi Kotabe to create the box art and the instruction manual. In the manual, because the game's visuals at the time couldn't really convey how vast Hyrule was, Miyamoto wanted at least the cover to give players a sense of the land, to show them Hyrule. So the background of the original box art looks like a detailed map of Hyrule. When it came to drawing the characters, Kotabe saw what the original Ganon looked like, and laughed, asking Miyamoto, "Wait, does this mean that guy is?" Miyamoto nodded, "Yep, that's him." You see, Miyamoto's generation in Japan was obsessed with Toyoi's animated film Journey to the West. Think about it. Even Akira Toriyama named his hero Son Goku, right? And Miyamoto felt that 2 characters from that toy film were especially memorable. He thought. One was the Bull Demon King, and the other was Pigsy. The Bull Demon King became inspiration for Bowser, the final boss in Super Mario Bros. And as for Pigsy, well, I don't need to spell that one out. Now you know why Ganon's original motif was a wild boar. In the instruction booklet that shipped with the game, Miyamoto also included a map of Hyrule, but his real intention was for players not to rely on the map at all. Yes, even back then, official strategy guides existed, but Miyamoto still hoped players would avoid looking up guides, think for themselves, and discuss discoveries with friends. Under that philosophy, even including a detailed map of Hyrule felt like a spoiler that could ruin the experience. But it was what the marketing team wanted, and it was an industry convention at the time, so Miyamoto couldn't refuse outright. To hold on to his last bit of principle, he sealed the map with a sticker. Later he said he figured most players would probably tear it open without a second thought. But for him, it was a final act of stubbornness. A spoiler warning, at least in spirit. Then the original Zelda first launched in Japan, and was warmly received by players. It earned a lot of praise right away, but the Famicom disk system couldn't escape its fate. It ultimately failed in the market. Fortunately, as semiconductor prices crashed, cartridges became cheaper to produce. So Nintendo returned to cartridges for the US release of The Legend of Zelda, but the original save system had relied on floppy disks, a feature unique to that format. Zelda was such a large game, they couldn't ship it without saves. So Uemura invented a battery-backed save mechanism, allowing players to store save data inside a cartridge, and the world's first cartridge with a built-in battery save was inaudible. Even though some content was cut, the US release of Zelda was still a major success. At the time, Minoru Arakawa in the US office was running a fan club initiative, people who voluntarily join. At first, not many people joined that club, but once Zelda launched in the US, players flooded in to discuss how to play, and to get official guides and art books. Membership surged, and the club grew from about 700 people to something much larger. Arakawa was happy but also had to respond to that rapid expansion, so they decided to launch Nintendo's own official magazine, and that magazine later became the famous Nintendo Power. So even though The Legend of Zelda didn't end up becoming the global trendsetter for a new game medium, and Super Mario Bros. Didn't end up being the last cartridge game, these two games still became foundational to modern game design. They helped open the era of home console games that followed, and that's the beginning of everything that came after.